Hi everyone, welcome to Accessibility with Meg, and this is Meg. And today we are continuing with our WCAG reading journey. And in the last video, we went through an overview of WCAG 2.x. And that document led us to Accessibility Fundamentals Overview document. And we're going to read this document today and explore this document today. So what I will be essentially doing is reading the text as it's laid out on the document, and I will take little pauses in between to explain what I'm reading. This is primarily an effort for myself so I can understand and read and learn. And as I make videos on accessibility, I'm putting it out there for people who this might benefit. Because I feel like the best way to learn anything is to actually go down and read the manuals, read the actual documentation that comes with the subject that you're trying to read. And in this case, it is WCAG. So WCAG is an ocean. You have one document leading to multiple documents. So reading all of that takes a lot of time. And I decided I will, just do this. I have been reading WCAG, as like sporadically opening some page, reading it, or opening some page, reading it. But this way of systematically reading everything that's on those documents will really help. So let's start reading the Accessibility Fundamentals Overview. Also, I want to, before we start reading, I want to mention that when I'm starting to read, I will say reading, and when I'm starting to explain something, I will say explaining. Okay, so we can demarcate the difference and stay true to this document. Okay, reading Accessibility Fundamentals Overview. The following resources provide information for getting started with accessibility. Introduction to Web Accessibility. Introduces web accessibility and links to additional resources. Includes accessibility into context, why accessibility is important for individuals, businesses, society, making digital technology accessible, evaluating accessibility, and basic examples. Video introduction to web accessibility and W3C standards, which is a 4-minute video. So basically just telling us what this document is. It is giving us an introduction to web accessibility within this fundamentals overview. The first document is an introduction to web accessibility. And when there is also a video introduction to web accessibility and W3C standards. It's a 4-minute video. Let's read through this document, then we'll come back and go through each of these links. The next point, reading. Accessibility, it's about people. This document explains the people aspect of accessibility, links to web accessibility perspectives, explore the impact and benefit for everyone, videos that illustrate accessibility essential for some, useful for all, 10 1-minute videos and 7-minute compilation. It also has how people with disabilities use the web, introduces stories of web users, diverse abilities and barriers, tools and techniques, and videos that illustrate accessibility. It's about people. Also, all the users and web accessibility resources can be found in this document, and accessibility, usability, and inclusion. Okay. Explanation. So here is an explanation for what's within the accessibility. It's about people document. You have accessibility perspectives and exploring how accessibility is useful to some, but it's also useful to all, right? So just not temporary disability benefits, but also permanent and just short-term disability benefits. And people without disabilities as well can benefit from accessibility when it's in place. So that's kind of information that would be there. Also, how people with disabilities use the web. So I'm thinking there would be personas here. So just giving us examples of how people with disabilities and different kinds of disabilities use the web. And what are the barriers that they experience, or what are the tools and techniques that they use. And there are videos that illustrate accessibility as well. So also older users, so elderly people, seniors, when they use the web, how do they traverse the web, and how accessibility helps people, seniors, use the internet safely and more easily, right? And then accessibility, usability, inclusion, that's another part of this section. Let's continue with this current document, Accessibility Fundamentals Overview. Reading. Third point, essential components of web accessibility. Shows how the web accessibility depends on several components of web development and interaction working together, and shows the relationship between Y guidelines and other standards. Okay. Y, as we know, WAI is Web Accessibility Initiative. This is an initiative by the W3C Guideline Committee, and this document, which is called the Essential Components of Web Accessibility, it shows how web accessibility depends on several components of web development and interaction working together, and shows the relationship between the guidelines and the standards. Interesting. Reading Accessibility Principles. A concise introduction to accessibility requirements for website apps, browsers, and other tools. It is organized similar to the Y accessibility standards and provides a useful bridge to the standards. Read this page before reading the standards or guidelines. Okay, so you have accessibility principles, which basically introduces us to accessibility requirements for different assets. And it is organized similar to the Y accessibility standards and provides a useful bridge to the standards. Read this before reading the standards or guidelines, it says. So yeah, we are going to read it because we're going to read all of these on this page. Then we have okay, I'm continuing reading. I keep forgetting to say reading and explaining. So reading, research, accessibility user requirements, documentation of research on user needs in virtual or immersive environments, XR, real-time communication, RTC, collaboration tools, natural language interfaces, multimedia, and for low vision and cognitive disabilities. Okay. Still reading. Artificial Intelligence, AI, and Accessibility Research Symposium 2023. Summaries, transcripts, and videos of the International Symposium exploring the positive and negative impacts of artificial intelligence, or AI, in digital accessibility. Okay, so there is a research section which will, you have access to these kinds of documentations, which are research on user needs in like different other environments like virtual immersive environments or real-time communication, multimedia, etc. And also AI research. So we have an accessibility research symposium videos on this section, which is very good. Okay. All right, reading digital accessibility courses. Digital Accessibility Foundation's free online course introduces a self-paced course from W3C for developers, designers, UX, writers, managers, advocates, designed for technical and non-technical learners, including students, instructors, professionals, and people with disabilities. Course is free with optional certificate. So yeah, they have courses as well, and these are the links to those courses. If you can go there and do these courses, if you're new to all of this or not, it's always good to learn more. So yeah, they have a couple of courses listed here. Reading course list of digital accessibility education, training, and certification lists courses from different providers. So there is a document which has a list of courses from different other providers that one can do. Related pages, get resources for, links to resources for designers, developers, testers, managers, and more. Nice. Again, edited by Sean Lawton Henry. Okay, that's a lot of information in this one page. So we will now start getting into each of these pages just to see what they contain and take this video further. Okay, continuing further, let's get into this link where it says Introduction to Web Accessibility. And we have a video here. So I'm going to click this video and see what happens. Okay, so we're taken to this page and it says Video Introduction to Web Accessibility and W3C Standards. Let's play it.
Hi, my name is Shadi Abu Zahra. I'm the Accessibility Strategy and Technology Specialist at W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium. And today, I'd like to tell you about web accessibility. The web is for many people an essential part of daily life, at work, at home, and on the road. Web accessibility means that people with disabilities can use the web equally. For example, somebody who cannot use their arms and uses a mouse stick to type, or someone who cannot hear well and uses captions to watch videos, or someone who cannot see well and uses a screen reader to read aloud what's on the screen. Accessibility has many benefits. For example, captions benefit anyone in a loud or in a quiet environment, and good color contrast works better when there is glare. Also, people with age-related impairments, such as reduced dexterity, benefit. In fact, everyone has a better user experience with an improved layout and design. A lot of accessibility can be built into the underlying code of websites and applications. Web technologies from W3C, such as HTML, provide support for many accessibility features. For example, features to provide text alternatives for images, which are read aloud by screen readers and also used by search engines. Also, headings, labels, and other code supports accessibility and improves the quality overall. Good authoring tools, such as wikis, content management systems, and code editors, help create accessible code, either automatically or with input from the author. Also, web browsers, media players, and apps need to support accessibility features. W3C provides standards to help make the web accessible, which are internationally recognized by governments and businesses. Most well known is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG, WCAG is also ISO standard 4500 and adopted in the European standard called EN 301549. It is built around 4 core principles. First, perceivable. For example, so people can see the content or hear it. Operable. For example, so people can use the computer by typing or by voice. Understandable. For example, so people get clear and simple language. And robust, so people can use different assistive technologies. Besides WCAG, W3C also provides the authoring tool Accessibility Guidelines, ATAG, which defines requirements for content management systems, code editors, and other software. And the User Agent Accessibility Guidelines, UAAG, defines requirements for web browsers and media players. There are over 1 billion people with disabilities, or around 15 to 20% of the population. The UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities defines access to information, including the web, as a human right. Most countries around the world have ratified this UN Convention, and several have adopted binding policies too. Yet, regardless of any laws and regulations, implementing the accessibility standards is essential for people with disabilities and useful for all. For more information on web accessibility, visit w3.org/WAI.
So that's the video. And we see that the video's information is available in different languages. You can go here, there are links for it. As a text transcript with description of visuals. It's also available on YouTube. So we have the different, like on a W3C server, you have the different formats. You have English captions, VTT files, and a list of other language files available as well. Nice. Okay, reading further, learn more. For more information, see Introduction to Web Accessibility, Web Accessibility Perspectives videos, explore the impact and benefits for everyone, videos and information on specific accessibility topics. There's also the WAI website, Reading Why website, to find a wide range of resources on different aspects of web accessibility, standards, education, testing and evaluation, project management, and policy. So you can go to the WAI website for all of this information. Permission to use this video. You may use this video if you include a link to this page. More information is available in Use WAI material permission to use with attribution. I'm just going to say that all of this content that I'm showing with WCAG is copyright to W3C. I have no hand in how this video was created or any of that. Just this learning video is what I'm creating. I don't plan to monetize from these videos, but I do plan to share this information. So yeah, it's all copyright to W3C. Then we have audio description, reading. Audio description, this video does not include audio description because the visuals only support the audio and do not provide additional information. In this case, audio description would be more distracting than useful to most people, including people who cannot see the visuals. The transcript and description below includes descriptions of the supporting visuals. Okay. So if you want examples of videos with audio description, see Web Accessibility Perspectives Audio Described YouTube playlist. Or if you can select one of the videos on the Web Accessibility Perspectives webpage and select Enable Audio Description. Stopping reading. So we see over here that there is so much of information, right? So we keep going through the content on here. It's just getting deeper and deeper and deeper, right? So there's a lot of information about just this video. The important part is this video that we just played. And there are ways, if you go to this page, I will be putting the links in the description within the video that we are creating, and you can reach this page to actually access this video in different other ways. Okay, right. Let's go back to the introduction to accessibility. Was it from here? Sorry, the accessibility fundamentals page, and we were in. Okay, let's just. Okay, we are back onto the accessibility fundamentals overview document, and continuing, we are now looking at accessibility. It's about people. So like we said, this is a document that explains the people aspect of accessibility, and it has different other links. It links to other documents within there. So let's go in there first. And we have reached the accessibility, it's about people document. Starting to read. Accessibility, it's about people. Accessibility is about ensuring that digital technology is usable by people with disabilities. Checklists, standards, and laws are important tools to help achieve accessibility. Yet sometimes they get the focus instead of the fundamental goal of accessibility, meeting the needs of disabled people in the real world. Absolutely right. Continuing reading. Many Y resources cover the organizational, technical, and standards aspects of accessibility. The following Y resources help you understand the people aspects. Stopping reading. So below here we have a list of different other resources which give us more information about the people aspect of accessibility, and which is the core, the most primary aspect is the people aspect of accessibility, right? So the fundamental goal is to meet the needs of disabled people in the real world. And here we are trying to meet the digital and internet needs of people with disabilities. So there are different resources listed here. I'm just going to first read through these resources, and then we will go through them one after the other. So web accessibility perspectives explore the impact and benefits for everyone. Videos that illustrate accessibility, essential for some, useful for all. Learn about the impact of accessibility on people with disabilities and the benefit of, for everyone in a variety of situations. Pages include supporting information, 10 one-minute videos, and a 7-minute compilation. Okay, so there is a 7-minute compilation and 10 like 1-minute videos within this resource that help you, and it gives you a web accessibility perspective, exploring the impact and benefits for all people, not just people with disabilities. Okay. The next resource is how people with disabilities use the web. So it provides user stories like personas, like of people with different disabilities, describes tools and approaches that people use to browse the web, and the barriers they encounter due to poor design. Includes videos that illustrate accessibility. It's about people. Okay. Yeah, I'm just stopping to read and explaining that I will probably not go into each of these resources right now, because then it becomes this little, you can keep exploring and exploring, but we have to still cover all the rest of the content within the fundamentals document that we started with, right? So I'm just going to read through each of these documents on this level, and then we will get into the details of these in other videos, okay? So the third resource, continuing to read, Old Users and Web Accessibility, Meeting the Needs of Aging Web Users, explains that design products that are easier for older people to use is similar to designing for people with disabilities. So it links to developing websites for older people, how web content accessibility guidelines, WCAG 2.0 applies, and web accessibility for older users, a literature review. Okay. So this is a resource which talks about seniors and how their needs for accessibility of the web can be met. Okay. And then the next resource is Accessibility, Usability, and Inclusion. Continuing reading. This document explains the distinctions and overlaps between accessibility, usability, and inclusive design, encourages increased coordination across research and practice in these disciplines, and points out the importance of maintaining the focus of accessibility on people with disabilities. Yeah. So this is a very interesting topic because accessibility, usability, and inclusive design, though they are similar, they are not the same, they're different, but they go hand in glove with one another, and they all have to be centered towards that final experience that a person with a disability has before anything else, right? So that's what that document would be talking about. Continuing reading. Related resources. Cognitive Accessibility at W3C introduces existing guidelines and additional work on accessibility for people with cognitive and learning disabilities. So, yeah, this is a very good resource as well. The next one, continuing reading, Involving Users in Web Projects for Better, Easier Accessibility, describes how project managers, designers, and developers can better understand accessibility issues and implement more effective accessibility solutions. It introduces a user-centered accessibility approach. Very nice. Okay, so that's what this document contains, accessibility. It's about people. This document actually requires a separate video to go into the details of each of these links, and I will be doing that at some point because it has a lot of very useful information. Right. Rolling back to the accessibility fundamentals overview, which we are currently studying. Moving to the next point, which is essential components of web accessibility. So shows how web accessibility depends on several components of web development and interaction working together, and shows the relationship between the guidelines and other standards. Okay, so let's click through. We've reached the page Essential Components of Web Accessibility. Continuing to read. Summary. This page shows how web accessibility depends on several components working together and how improvements in specific components could substantially improve web accessibility. It provides the foundation for understanding the different accessibility standards developed by the W3C Web Accessibility Initiative, or WCAG. Page contents. How the components relate, interdependencies between components, guidelines, and other standards. So this is a very nice document to go through because it shows how web accessibility depends on several components working together. So the collaboration between these different components helps us achieve accessibility, and that's what this is explaining. Right, reading further. Introduction. It is essential that several different components of web development and interaction work together in order for web to be accessible to people with disabilities. These components include content, the information in the web page and web application, including natural information like text, images, and sounds, code or markup that defines structure, presentation, etc. Stopping to read. So the first aspect is with content. Content can be of two types. They're natural information, that's the content that you see on the page, things like text, images, sounds, videos, etc., etc., right? So these are what you're seeing on the web pages. And then you have information in the form of code, markup, and that gives structure, the scaffold basically of a web page. And so that content as well needs to be made accessible in certain ways. And so that's what this is talking about. Also, the next point is web browsers, media, and players and other user agents. Okay, so the next component to this first piece was content. The next component are the web browsers, the media players, and other user agents, which help you to basically view this content, hear this content, that give you this content, present this content to you, right? So those user agents, as they are known, they are a major part of accessibility as well. The next is assistive technologies. So in some cases, screen readers, alternative keyboards, switches, scanning software, etc. Yes. Sorry, stopping to read and explaining. Assistive technology is a very, very important aspect of accessibility because people with disabilities utilize assistive technology to reach this content, to consume this content, to understand this content, right? To view this content. So it is very important. And it is one of the major components of this it is one of the major components of accessibility. And then you have it becomes very essential and crucial part of this cycle of accessibility, right? And then you have the next component, which is users, reading, users' knowledge, experiences, and in some cases, adaptive strategies using the web. Yeah. So user is a very essential part of any project because it is the people who are going to use this product, right? So just having understanding of who your users are, who's the audience, who's going to benefit from this is very important. Just the experiences that they will go through when your content is structured a certain way, when accessibility is in place. Just having this knowledge is very important. And also using adaptive strategies in some cases to accommodate special needs is also very important, right? So that's the user is a very, very crucial part or a component for accessibility. And then you have developers, so people who create accessible assets. You have developers would include your designers, coders, your authors, I would even put, evaluators like your testers within this group, because you do participate in in the development process, because as an SME on accessibility, you are available on all phases of the SDLC, and so that's an important aspect. Okay, continuing to read, authoring tools, software that creates websites. Okay, so the next component mentioned here is authoring tools. So authoring tools are important because they help you create the websites, and they need to be accessible themselves as well, right? And then you have, reading further, evaluation tools, web accessibility evaluation tools, HTML validators, CSS validators, etc. Stopping to read, evaluation tools are very important because they are the automated part of accessibility. Now, when you're testing for accessibility, you might just run this through a automation tool like Wave or like DQ DevTools, and you would find some results, right? This is not 100% evaluation, but these tools do manage to pull out issues that sometimes you might miss as with manual testing. These tools are very good because about 30 to 35% of the issues are identified right away with these evaluation tools, and so they are a very important part or component of the accessibility. And just going through in this introduction the different components mentioned here: content, web browsers, media players or user agents, assistive technology, users, developers, authoring tools, evaluation tools. Reading further, how the components relate. There is a graphic image here with content on one side, developers, it's a triangle with content, developers and users. And there are evaluation tools and authoring tools on the developers and content side. And for users, there are browsers, media players, assistive technology on the users and content side. Okay. Now, reading, web developers usually use authoring tools and evaluation tools to create web content. People or the users use web browsers, multimedia players, assistive technologies, and other user agents to get and interact with the content. Stopping to read. So there are two main players. Developers, like we know, include coders, testers, designers, just about everybody who works in creating an accessible experience would come under the developers. And so that's one aspect. And the other aspect are the users, just about everybody who would use this content, right? Every person and the different technology that they would use to use this content. Now, reading further, interdependencies between components. So there are significant interdependencies between the components. That is, the components must work together in order for the web to be accessible. For example, for alternative text on images. Technical specifications address alternative text. For example, HTML defines the alternative text attribute alt of the image element, img. Y guidelines like WCAG, ATAG, UAAG. I don't know how these are said, but I'm just saying it that way. But WCAG and ATAG we know, and UAAG is what I've just said. continuing reading, described below. Define how to implement alternative text for accessibility in the different components. Okay, that's for Y guidelines. Continuing to read. Developers provide the appropriate alternative text wording. Authoring tools enable, facilitate, and promote providing alternative text in a web page. Evaluation tools are used to help check that alternative text exists. User agents provide human and machine interface to the alternative text. Assistive technologies provide human interface to the alternative text in various modalities. Users know how to get the alternative text from their user agent and/or assistive technology as needed. Implementation cycle. When implementation cycle, continuing to read. When accessibility features are effectively implemented in one component, the other components are more likely to implement them. There is a graphic image here, which has the authoring tools on one side, browsers, media, players, and assistive technologies on the other side, and there is content that flows within these three components. So when reading further, when browsers, media players, assistive technologies, and other user agents support an accessibility feature, users are more likely to demand it and developers are more likely to implement it in their content. When developers want to implement an accessibility feature in their content, they are more likely to demand that their authoring tool make it easy to implement. When authoring tools make a feature easy to implement, developers are more likely to implement it in their own content. Now, when an accessibility feature is implemented in most content, developers and users are more likely to demand that user agents support it. So when one component is weak, what happens? Reading. If an accessibility feature is not implemented in one component, there is little motivation for other components to implement it. Pausing to read. So previously we saw that if one component implements accessibility thoroughly, it cascades down and it's into other components and people wanting to add it there as well. But there is a flip side to it, which we are reading right now, which is when one component is weak, then what happens, right? So that as well, there is very little motivation for other components to implement it because, whatever is with that component is again cascading. So if it's not implemented properly, that's lower intentional motivation for other components to implement it. For example, developers are unlikely, continuing to read. For example, developers are unlikely to implement an accessibility feature that authoring tools do not support and that most browsers or assistive technologies do not implement consistently. Now we're looking at a graphic image with different components. You have content, you have authoring tools, browsers, media players, assistive technologies. There are developers on one side using authoring tools, and there are users on the other side using browsers, assistive technologies, etc. The flow in the content is kind of split between the two. It's not smooth like we had seen in the previous image, where the content flow happened in a circle between all the different components, right? Here you see the content flow is kind of broken up. So if one component has, reading further, if one component has poor accessibility support, sometimes other components can compensate through workarounds that require much more effort and are not good for accessibility overall. For example, developers can do more work to compensate for some lack of accessibility support in authoring tools. For example, coding markup directly instead of through a tool. Users can do more work to compensate for some lack of accessibility support in browsers, media players, and assistive technology, and lack of accessibility of content. For example, using different browsers and assistive technologies to overcome different accessibility issues. However, in most cases and workarounds, the workarounds are not implemented and the result is still poor accessibility. Additionally, sometimes poor accessibility support in one component cannot be reasonably overcome by other components, and the result is inaccessibility, making it impossible for some people with disabilities to use a particular website, page, or feature. So stopping to read, so we see in this document the interdependency between the different components of accessibility. So having this smooth flow for accessibility happens only when accessibility is implemented by all the different components within, right? Okay. The last section on this page, continuing to read, guidelines and other standards. The World Wide Web Consortium, W3C, Web Accessibility Initiative, WAI or Y, develops web accessibility standards for the different components. Authoring Tool Accessibility Guidelines, ATAG Overview, addresses authoring tools. WCAG 2 Overview addresses web content and is used by developers, authoring tools, and accessibility evaluation tools. User Agent Accessibility Guidelines, or UAAG, that I call UAAG overview, addresses web browsers and media players, including some aspects of accessibility of assistive technologies. These accessibility guidelines are based on the fundamental technical specification of the web and are developed in coordination with the W3C technical specifications, HTML, CSS, SVG, SMIL, etc. W3C also develops technical specifications that directly address accessibility, including ARIA, which is the Accessible Rich Internet Applications Suite, which defines a way to make web applications more accessible to people with disabilities. It especially helps with dynamic content and advanced user interface controls developed with AJAX, HTML, JavaScript, and related technologies. We see another image which has content on the top, and again developers on the left and users on the right. Developers are using authoring tools and evaluation tools, while users are using browsers, media players, assistive technologies, similar to the other two graphic images that we spoke about. But this also has accessibility guidelines at the bottom, has ATAG, WCAG, and UAAG. The technical specifications has HTML, ARIA, CSS, SVG, SMIL, etc. So basically, these different aspects are included within the standards that W3C has come up with the Y Accessibility Initiative. And all of this information is available and accessed through here. Okay. So that brings us to the end of the essential components of web accessibility. We're going to go back to accessibility fundamentals and continue from there. We're back onto the accessibility fundamentals overview page, and the next segment here is accessibility principles. So accessibility principles, concise introduction to accessibility requirements for websites, apps, browsers, and other tools. Okay, we're going to click through and read this. So we are on the accessibility principles page, reading. Accessibility principles, summary. This page introduces some of the web accessibility requirements for websites, web applications, browsers, and other tools. It provides references to the international standards from W3C Web Accessibility Initiative, or Y, and to stories of web users. So it's very interesting, but this page gives you more information about accessibility requirements for websites, applications, browsers, and other tools, like they say. And it's also giving you an insight into accessibility stories of people who use the internet using accessibility tools, etc. Right? Okay, reading further, note, this is not a complete list of accessibility requirements. Okay. Page contents, web accessibility standards, perceivable information and user interface, which has text alternatives for non-text content, captions and other alternatives for multimedia. Content can be presented in different ways. Content is easier to see and hear. Operable user interface and navigation, which has functionality is available from a keyboard. Users have enough time to read and use content. Content does not cause seizures and physical reactions. Users can easily navigate, find content, and determine where they are. Users can use different input modalities beyond keyboard. Next, understandable information and user interface, under which we have text is readable and understandable. Content appears and operates in predictable ways. Users are helped to avoid and correct mistakes. Last, robust. Content and reliable interpretation. Content is compatible with current and future user tools. Pausing to read. So, this is not all of the success criteria within WCAG standards. This is just basically the core principles and summing up of the content that you might expect within each of these principle guidelines, right? Principles, the guidelines, and the different success criteria that are there. But that document is extensive. There's a lot more in there. This is just like a overall or a peek into what you can expect. So going further and reading, web accessibility standards. Web accessibility relies on several components that work together. Some of these include web content, refers to any part of the page, including text, images, forms, and multimedia, as well as any markup code, scripts, applications, and such. User agents, software that people use to access web content, including desktop graphical browsers, voice browsers, mobile phone browsers, multimedia players, plugins, and some assistive technologies. Authoring tools, software or services that people use to produce web content, including code editors, document conversion tools, content management systems, blogs, database scripts, and other tools. Pausing to read. So we have gone through this a little bit in the previous document, right? We understood about the different components, and here is the same thing again in a little more, explained a little more. Reading further, more about web accessibility standards. These components interrelate and support each other. For instance, web content needs to include text alternatives for images. This information needs to be processed by web browsers and then conveyed to assistive technologies such as screen readers. To create such text alternatives, authors need authoring tools that support them to do so. More background is provided in essential components of web accessibility. Standards play a vital role in defining accessibility requirements for each of these components. Some accessibility requirements are easy to meet, yet understanding the basics of how people with disabilities use the web helps implement them more effectively and efficiently. Some aspects of accessibility require more technical skills and advanced knowledge of how people use the web. In all cases, involving users early and throughout your web projects will make your work better and easier. The W3C Web Accessibility Initiative, WCAG, provides a set of guidelines that are internationally recognized as the standard for web accessibility. These are Web Content Accessibility Guideline, WCAG, User Agent Accessibility Guidelines, UAAG, Authoring Tools Accessibility Guidelines, ATAG. There is also a Y specification for accessibility-rich internet applications, or Y ARIA, which include dynamic content and advanced user interface controls developed with AJAX, JavaScript, and related web technologies. Stopping to read. So basically, we understood that all the components, they're interrelated and they support each other. And this aspect of accessibility is brought through by the W3C Web Accessibility Initiative that gives you guidelines which are global, they are internationally recognized, and they include three main guidelines. One is the WCAG, which is what we are trying to understand, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which also has another guideline, which is the User Agent Accessibility Guidelines, which is UAAG, which is for accessibility of user agents, and Authoring Tool Accessibility Guidelines, so accessibility of authoring tools, right? Like to remind you again, user agents are things like browsers, media players, things which basically deliver that information to you. That would be your user agents, and our authoring tools would be tools that are used to actually create code and do authoring, right? So they have different guidelines for both of those, and then WCAG is for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. There is also ARIA patterns and ARIA specifications, which is also known as the Y ARIA specifications, because it is provided by the W3C Y, which is the Web Accessibility Initiative. And this specification, it helps us to include dynamic content and advanced user interface controls. So all the web components or elements that cannot be natively, that are not natively accessible, can be made accessible using Y ARIA. Okay, So these are the different documents that are very important for accessibility. These are the different standards that we need to keep in mind when it comes to the core of accessibility technique, right? But never forget that the most important thing to remember is the ultimate goal of accessibility. The users with disabilities and users without disabilities, and just the users, people who access using accessibility devices, using accessibility resources, etc. They are the major part of accessibility, and the experience that is provided to them is the ultimate goal for accessibility. Okay, reading further. Perceivable information and user interface, text alternatives for non-text content. So text alternatives are equivalents of non-text content. Examples include short equivalents for images, including icons, buttons, and graphics, description of data represented on charts, diagrams, and illustrations, brief descriptions of non-text content such as audio and video files, labels for form controls, input, and other user interface components. Okay. Text alternatives convey the purpose of an image or function to provide an equivalent user experience. For instance, an appropriate alt text text alternative for a search button would be search rather than magnifying lens. Text alternatives can be presented in a variety of ways. For instance, they can be read aloud for people who cannot see the screen and for people with reading difficulties, enlarged to custom text sizes or displayed on braille devices. Text alternatives serve as labels for controls and functionality to aid keyboard navigation and navigation by voice recognition or speech input. They also act as labels to identify audio, video, and files in other formats, as well as applications that are embedded as a part of a website. Stopping to read. The first part, which is about text alternatives for non-text content. Non-text content is any content which is not text. Okay, so things like images, icons, buttons, graphics, videos, diagrams, just audio or anything that's not text is non-text content, and non-text content needs to be conveyed correctly to assistive device users. So a very important aspect is to provide text alternatives, because text alternatives can be can be consumed by assistive technology, and they can understand what those elements are on that page. Okay, otherwise they don't know it's there, right? So people who use assistive technologies have partial or complete blindness when they use it, and so it is important that they know about all the elements that are present on the page, and if they are non-text, they are not translated like text elements, and so they need to be explicitly labeled with text alternatives or with transcripts if they are videos, etc., to be able to be understood and consumed. So, yeah. Moving on, starting to read. Accessibility requirements related to text alternatives, links to technical specification. So here, stopping to read, here you will find there are different links to the technical specifications that we had seen, which were WCAG, UAAG, and ATAG. And this section has got WCAG, and it has the different links right here. Okay. Moving on to the next section, reading stories related to text alternatives. So they have links to different stories, which are basically experiences of users or people. These are like personas, and what that person's experienced. So, a reporter with limited use of his arms. So, what is his experience? Lakshmi, a senior accountant who is blind. What's her experience? Dhruv, older adult student who is deaf. Martha, marketing assistant who is deaf and blind. Stephen, student with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and dyslexia. Ilyas, retiree with low vision, hand tremor, and mild short-term memory loss. Okay, so these are some stories that they have listed here. We will not be going into the details because we are still just covering the fundamentals. We will come back to all of these things when we start exploring further, right? So, yeah, reading further. Captions and other alternatives for multimedia. People who cannot hear audio or see video need alternatives. Examples include text transcripts and captions for audio content, such as recordings of a radio interview, audio descriptions, such as narrations, which are narrations to describe important visual details in a page. Sign language interpretation of audio content, including relevant auditory experiences. Okay, stopping to read. One of the most important aspects of multimedia or videos and audio is text transcripts are very crucial. Why the emphasis on text in accessibility is because most of the assistive devices and most of the devices used to access the internet by people with disabilities, most of these devices, in fact, all of them, they can read and translate and consume simple plain text. Okay, so it's important that non-text content of any kind be explained to them in simple text. And text transcripts is an explanation of the audio of the content. Of the content that's within that video. So a text transcript will give you a detailed explanation of the happenings within there, right? Text alternatives like captions can give you a line-by-line description of the video that's being played. And then you also have audio descriptions, which sometimes there are visuals, that are not spoken. There is nothing spoken. There's just a visual, but it adds meaning to the video. And if you miss that, you miss understanding the video, then you need to have audio descriptions for such, like silent movies, for example. There has to be audio descriptions because there's no way for anyone to understand what's going on in there, right? So that's what audio descriptions do. And then sign language interpretation of audio content, including relevant auditory experiences. Okay. Reading further, well-written text transcripts contain the correct sequence of any auditory or visual information, provide a basic level of accessibility, and facilitate the production of captions and audio descriptions. Reading further on, accessibility requirements related to multimedia links to technical specifications. So, these are specific links to time-based media, alternative content. So again, WCAG, UAAG, and ATAG. We are going to concern ourselves with WCAG primarily. So when we do the different versions like 2.0, 2.1, 2.2 WCAG, we will see all of these guidelines and the different success criteria that are related to it. Okay. Then reading further, stories related to multimedia. Again, Lakshmi, senior accountant who is blind. There's a story about this here. There's Dhruv, older adult student who's deaf. Martha, marketing assistant who is deaf and blind. And yeah. Further reading. Content can be presented in different ways. For users to be able to change the presentation of content, it is necessary that headings, lists, tables, input fields, and content structure are marked up properly. Sequences of information and instruction are independent of any presentation. Browsers and assistive technologies provide settings to customize the presentation. Okay, stopping to read. It's very important that HTML is properly structured, markup, the tags are properly written, they are meaningful semantic tags, native tags which have accessibility built in. Okay, the correct tags are used for the correct purpose is very, very crucial. So moving away from divs and actually using proper native code, HTML5 code, is very crucial. Also things like all the information that's presented, the instructions that are presented have to be clear, okay? And they can be accessed independent of the presentation. So just the sequences of information that's being presented. An example, example could be a text transcript that basically explains everything can be accessed separate from the presentation in text format, very important. Browsers and assistive technologies, they provide settings to customize the presentation. Yes, so all your browsers and assistive technologies have settings within where you can go in and customize what you're looking at, right? For example, you want the size of your font to be increased. So when you increase it, you have to make sure that clarity is maintained, no information is cut off when you zoom into your content, or your settings are at a higher pixel value within your text size, for example, right? So things like that are very important, and all your content needs to be presented in different ways so that people with different sensibilities, different disability needs, are able to access this. Okay, so different abilities are able to access this. So, yeah, reading further. Meeting this requirement allows content to be correctly read aloud, enlarged, and adapted to meet the needs and preferences of different people. For instance, it can be presented using custom color combinations, text size, and other styling to facilitate reading. This requirement also facilitates other forms of adaptation, including automatic generation of page outlines and summaries to help people to get an overview and to focus on particular parts more easily. Accessibility requirements related to adaptability. So again, there are within this section links to the technical specifications for WCAG, UAAG, and ATAG. We'll not go into the details of this. Continuing to read further, stories related to adaptability. So we have stories related to adaptability listed out here. We will come back to this when we go into details per page, right? Okay. Reading further, content is easier to see and hear. Distinguishable content is easier to see and hear. Such content includes color is not used as the only way of conveying information or identifying content. Default foreground and background color combinations provide sufficient contrast. When users resize text up to 400% or change text spacing, no information is lost. Text reflows in small windows, viewports, and when users make the text larger, images of text are resizable, replaced with actual text, and avoided where possible. Users can pause, stop, and adjust the volume of audio that is played on the website. Background audio is low and can be turned off to avoid interference and distraction. Pausing to read. This is not the only requirements. These are inclusive. These and many other are mentioned in WCAG. standards. These are a few of the very important ones for content that make it easier to see and hear and simplify the content so that it can be accessed by people with disabilities. Reading further, meeting this requirement helped separate foreground from background to make important information more distinguishable. This includes considerations for people who do not use assistive technologies and for people using assistive technologies who may observe interference from prominent audio and visual content in the background. For instance, many people with color blindness do not use any particular tools and rely on proper design and provide sufficient color contrast between text and surrounding background. For others, audio that is automatically played could interfere with text speech or with assistive listening devices. And so there should be a way to pause any automatically playing content. This has become a rather long video, so I'm going to pause here and we will continue from here in the next video. Thank you. And if you like the content you are seeing, please do subscribe to my channel. That will help me. Like I said, this is all content that I'm showing. This is copyright to the W3C, and I'm just using that content that they have created to create these videos for my own understanding and to share with anybody who can get help while when content is read out and explained this way. Thank you so much, and I'll see you again. Bye.